And I think that that's really this fundamental connection between matter and thought, is this highway of fractals that produces this fundamental synergy, and that the synergy is exactly what we're experiencing, the synergetic field of consciousness, and these fractals bouncing off each other, expanding and contracting into each other. Some of those fractals lead into matter, and some of those fractals lead out of matter into the field of thought. But the whole structure is just this endless field of fractals. And it's like I've said before, if I sit and I expand my consciousness outwards, and I'm like expanded outwards through the solar system, expanded outwards through like beyond the solar system, expanded outwards to like the bounds of the galaxy, expanded outwards towards all the galaxies. It's like a cell in a bigger organism, and go beyond all of those galaxies to find the bounds of a universe, and expand that beyond the universe to the multiple universes. And then I notice that as I'm expanding outwards, I start noticing that I'm getting bigger and I'm getting bigger. And I notice that those galaxies that I'm expanding out through, those are like particles in a DNA chain. And those become cells, and the cells become and before I know it, I'm coming out of my own eyes, because I got so big that I came out of the most minuscule places. And I think like the bigger and the smaller are somehow fundamentally connected through this fundamental field of fractal geometry, which is the structure of the universe. And it connects the smallest things to the biggest things. And so the idea that you can see the whole universe in a grain of sand isn't just a metaphor. It's a lot more than a metaphor. So, yeah, man, 150,000% Howard. Big love. Welcome. We've got General Shinobi, who I like to call Shinobi One Kenobi. That's my nickname for General Shinobi. And he's come to share his insights with us. And you all know Shinobi. Shinobi's a grand researcher, and uncovering a lot of truths. I think he seems like he lost a bet. What happened to your hair, brother? I asked you before. Like you come here with no hair.
So do you know what? I'll actually I'll share a photo. I need to send it to my computer. I'll do that in a minute. I'll show you a photo. My hair's in the garden, actually, because I decided like my hair was kind of just getting in the way a little bit. It was kind of a bit of a hassle, a bit of a faff, because I had like dreads in the back part for a couple of years, and I hadn't learned how to tighten them. So sort of like a friend would come over once in a while and sort it out for me, and I'd pay him. But it would cost about, I think it was like 45, 60 quid a time. And yeah, I just felt like I needed to let the hair go. Howard's shaved his hair as well, apparently. I just feel much fresher for doing so. I've had quite a powerful cleanse. I've just getting over a sinus infection or sinusitis. I think I've had, like, at one point my cheeks were hurting so much. Still a bit blocked up, but I feel much better for doing so. And yeah, I just feel a bit more fresh letting the hair go. Esme said that birds like to make nests out of hair. So what I did is I put my hair in the garden. But because I had dreads, I turned it into a spider. So I have this like big clump of hair, and then I have my dreads around like a sun, but it looks like a spider. So no animals have touched it, and I don't blame them because it looks like a giant tarantula. But I'll share a photo shortly, and I should probably not make it look like a spider, because then the birds might actually use the hair. Have you heard of that, Franklin, before? Birds using hair as for a nest?
I don't know, but I reckon why wouldn't they?
They always have different fibers in there, like hairs. They'll use strings, sometimes like confetti, shiny plastic, tinsel. They sometimes will sparkle it up for their lady, make their little nest egg. But yeah, the hair does help them wind it all together and hold it to the cohesive parts, like all wrapped together well. So they definitely do use the hair, and they use other stuff. They use grass and things like that too, which has a similar process where it can they can bend it more, like whereas like the branches can only bend before they'll snap, and they have to use a lot more of them. But the hair can like really kind of weave it all together. So definitely, I think I found a lot of the nests that I collect.
Nice. Well, hopefully my hair can help the birds weave their nest together, because I do see myself as a bit of a weaver, kind of weaving in between this and that, using different threads to see the picture, the broader spectrum clearer. So hopefully, hopefully it will give these birds some insight too, maybe. But yeah, I hope they get some use out of it, and I'll share a photo in a little while.
Yeah, hair carries memory too, much like water does, and so they can get that imparted wisdom from the hair, just like a feather also carries memory and wisdom and luck.
I think by just kind of like, if we take this theory and just sort of apply it to everything, it would suggest that pretty much every object has some capacity to hold memories if you think about it. Because like I did an experiment one time. I remember like I was hanging out at my cousin's house and sort of like walking in their big back field. And, you know, I'm kind of an eccentric guy. I'll get sort of random funny thoughts that sort of like pop into my head, maybe like a joke or something like that. But I noticed that I would walk over a certain spot and the same image would flash into my head, indicating that like, you know, places in space and time essentially hold memories and hold information, right? Because like I think about like, you think about memory in terms of your own body, right? Like you think, for example, let's say you do some kind of physical exercise. Like they talk about the concept of muscle memory, right? Because those muscles, those bones and those tendons have a memory of that repetitive, you know, action or exercise that you were doing. And I think there really is a memory like in the body. I think that makes perfect sense. And I think this is the other aspect of the psychosomatic you know, obfuscation that we're talking about here, because when we talk about the distinction between, you know, spirit and matter, we're also talking about the split between, you know, mind and body. And what I've really started to notice is that there seems to be a deliberate effort, or maybe not deliberate, or maybe unconscious, either way, it's irrelevant, to basically say that ontologically speaking, you are nothing but your brain and you are nothing but your mind, and your body is this kind of unconscious secondary tertiary sort of extension of that mind. And that's why, but your mind is primarily, you know, who you are. Because I think in a lot of like Western culture, like I was thinking about it, how in a sense people in the Western culture tend to associate the will with the intellect, right? That the will and the intellect are synonymous with each other. So in a sense, you know, in the Western thought, we think of the intellect as being the sort of the nexus of consciousness, when in actuality, it's not really it's an important part of consciousness, but it's not the ipso facto ultimate decider, because in a lot of ways, the body also plays a massive role in how we understand our consciousness, in terms of like, you know, you think about like, you know, if something irritates your skin, for example, and then you see that object again, it's like your skin remembers that object is irritate, not your brain remembering, but your skin remembers just from seeing that stimuli in your sort of external environment. So, but yeah, I kind of like, but to sum it up, I would say like we have to talk about like the kind of the weird disconnect between the mind and the body, because people, you know, we're kind of trained to think that our brain is conscious, but every other part of our body is unconscious, right? So, and because of that, that's why there's all sorts of like weird, you know, body modification stuff. It becomes this sort of like whatever. And then you have the spiritual angle where people will tell you that, your body is just sort of like a vessel or a vehicle, and that you're just, pure consciousness. And I think that the relationship between consciousness and the body has been kind of like something I've been debating in my head for a while, because like on one hand, like I see the utility in both of these perspectives, right? Because to say that consciousness is not physical is to, suggest that there's a soul, there's an afterlife, there are planes beyond this one, there's an existence that transcends this physical form. But on the other hand, I feel that if we, don't say that our body has any role in who we are and any role of our conscious, I think that profoundly disconnects us from nature and the natural world. In a sense, the body is kind of like the bridge between the soul and nature in your world. The body is, in a sense, how the soul is able to interface with this natural world. And because I think that there is a conscious element to it. But because we basically have trained ourselves, and society has trained us to think of the world outside of our brain as essentially being dead and lacking consciousness. I think in a lot of ways you talk about, manifestation, and in Zarfexology, that's basically the manifestation of the Ozerfikes, the materialist Zerfikes, where basically the sort of the astral world is like, it's basically a dream realm where the dream realm doesn't exist. It's pretty dark, but the way I look at it is, instead of saying, this metaphysical paradigm is correct and this metaphysical paradigm is incorrect, Zarfexology basically says, okay, this metaphysical paradigm exists in this particular coordinate in space and time, and this worldview exists in this space and time. And whether they're true are how close are they to the center of the Zarfex, right? So the closer they are to the center of the Zarfex, the more they correspond with the truth of that Zarfex, and the further they're away, the more it's something that's kind of more like in the indeterminate zone, right? It hasn't necessarily been decided, whether it's part of it yet, or it might not be compatible with the Zarfex. But then you look at it but then when you took it the outer Zarfex perspective with this system, and then you start to understand that what's true in this Zarfex may not be indicative of what's true outside of it, and that creates a whole other new existential way of looking at it. But I think overall, I keep losing my train of thought here on these thoughts, because I go into so many different tangents. But yeah, I think when it comes to like the body and the mind, I think you're right in the sense that that what we believe comes manifest in our reality, but that's not just in our body, right? You say that like we have certain emotional pains in our body, like we have a certain like a psychological like affiliation, and that then has a direct correspondence with something that happens with like an organ or a particular limb in the body. But I think it has deeper metaphysical implications than even that. I think it affects how things manifest in reality. So let's see, the way I have this kind of figured out is that sort of depending upon what you believe in will determine the likelihood of your magical intent essentially manifesting, right? So there's like a high level and there's like a low level, right? So if you're someone who's really magical, you have a very low level because there's no filter from reality that's preventing you from manifesting your intent, because you've manifested a universe that is essentially magical. But if you live in a Zerfax that's not magical, you have a lot more inertia for your intent to essentially manifest, right? There's more of an inertia. So in a lot of ways, it's like, because like when it comes to people who are skeptical, there's different levels of intensity. Like there's some skeptics who are like, they don't believe in God, but you give them a hit of acid, you give them some shrooms, and they're basically they're changed overnight. Like there's some people like that. But then there's some people who are much deeper, who even a psychedelic trip won't convince them, right? And so that person is even deeper in the Zerfikes, and thus requires more psychic inertia for that particular belief system to, essentially be overcome. So the way what I'm saying here, Franklin, is that in a sense that it's like, even though it's not real, even though these worlds may not be necessarily real, they feel fundamentally real to the people experiencing them, to the point where you can't really distinguish whether they're real or fake. And it's important to mention that because in a lot of ways we think, oh, something's an illusion, something is fake. Oh, this is easy. I can disregard it. I can see past the illusion. I can see past the lies because I got that Gnostic perspective. I got that Gnostic spark that allows me to see the divine truth, and I can see through all the bullshit. But the reality is sometimes the bullshit is really deceptive and really, really clever. And you got to be kind of on guard. And sometimes the people who are making these illusions can be really good at them, and they can be really deceptive. And sometimes I think with Zarfexology and its multidimensional perspective, one of the things that I found really helpful in this is that by not believing that there is ultimately one reality or one universe, if a universe starts to seem problematic or wrong, I now have the ability to switch to a different universe so that I can look at that other universe from the outside and get a more objective and honest perspective. Because one of the things I've realized about Zerfaxes, which are essentially sort of deceptive Zerfaxes that, like a false religion, for example, one of the things that I've realized them is that, you can't really reason with them. They seem very real because in a sense that it's not just a belief system. They're active, living people, active, conscious beings that are manifesting these realities into our existence. And I think one of the reasons, and this is the one thing that, I get in a lot of trouble with in the occult community and people, tend to push back on, is that, obviously a lot of people know here that I am sort of a critic of the concept of sort of like a oneness or kind of like monistic perspectives. And that the problem is that when you kind of, blend all of your universes into one, and you do the kind of thing where everything is assigned from the universe, everything is speaking to me. The problem with that perspective is it can kind of leave you psychically vulnerable, because if you believe that, there's all these signs and the universe is talking to you, well, what if the universe is sending you bad signs? Or what if you're getting, communication that's not helpful or something that's problematic, or you're in a position where it's like, oh, it's the universe, I got to trust it, or this is my God, I got to trust him, and there's no other thing. And having that multidimensional perspective and realizing that, wait a minute, there's a universe that exists outside of this one, then I think from that perspective, you no longer have that sense of control, because, I think about the concept of Zerfaxes a lot, and something I meditate a lot in my practice. And one of the things that Sliz kind of pointed out to me, and she basically kind of said that, if you really want to get out of a Zerfax, you just have to stop engaging with it. Stop thinking about it. Stop thinking about materialism, Rich. Stop thinking about these ideas, because it's kind of like you're basically imagine you go into your enemy's house, right? And your enemy, let's change the metaphor here. Let's say you have some kind of enemy that has captured you and locked you in their house, and basically you defeated the villain, but instead of leaving the house, you're still yelling at the villain. You're complaining about, why have you trapped me here? Why have you left me here? And the villain's like, dude, go. You defeated me. You can leave. And so and I think when it comes to multi-Zarfexology, it's not just something that's psychological. It's something that you can actually, if you train to learn to visualize things with your peripheral vision, you can start to understand and actually see the Zerfaxes. You can actually see them with your physical eyes. And the way that I basically try to do that, this is actually what I call a sort of an open eye visualization sort of exercise, is I'll try to visualize some kind of color, right? So let's say I'm thinking of the color red, and I imagine a red light sort of on the edges of my peripheral vision, sort of on the edges of my vision. And within that red light, I imagine there's a red Zerfax that exists outside of the bubble I exist in right now. Because I think once you start to so I guess the best way to kind of understand it is that, and the way I basically kind of originally conceived of the idea is with peripheral vision, because I think there's a point in vision when you see with your physical eyes where the edges of your peripheral vision and what's happening in your mind's eye, in your third eye, actually sort of overlap with each other, right? So for example, like when you see, when people talk about seeing ghosts, entities, apparitions in their their peripheral vision, like they go to a haunted house or some place and they'll see some kind of entity in their peripheral vision. Well, that space in the peripheral vision seems to me to indicate that sort of middle ground between the physical and the astral, that there's a kind of another etheric intermediary space that we can see using the edges of our peripheral vision if we learn to train ourselves with. So I actually have hold on, I'm gonna pull something up here because this is actually one of my my older diagrams from back in the day, but I think I'm going to do this. So I think a lot of these ideas that I talk about are better understood visually, if you will, right? And so, do you see the object on the screen there? Right. So anyway, so basically what you do is, let's say you have a like a dresser drawer in your bedroom, right? So you look at it with your peripheral vision, so you only see half of the object with your vision, and the other half is obscured. And the idea here is that you try to visualize the rest of the object with your mind's eye. So you see like half of a dresser drawer with your peripheral vision, and then the other half is the part of the dresser drawer that exists outside of your peripheral vision. And I've learned that when I do this and I sort of visualize and use astral sort of like perception, you start to see things like entities and portals and other worlds. Like that's why I have this little gnome guy in here, just as kind of like a little joke. But it basically shows this. There's that with our peripheral vision, there is this kind of invisible reality that exists all around us. And the way I was able to conceptualize that is I take my vision and I try to make it as like a circle, like I can see. So what helps is actually squinting, because if you squint, you can sort of, or the other thing I do is I'll take my my fingers and put them on the edge, sort of towards on the sides of my temples, so I can see my fingers at my peripheral vision, so that I can better kind of like visualize that. But I find that by doing this kind of different style of visualization, where instead of sort of like looking at your astral visions as sort of being inside of your head or being in some sort of upper space, I try to conceptualize them as being outside of my peripheral vision. Like I'm in this Zerfax bubble and my peripheral vision is the edges of the bubble, and what exists outside of my peripheral vision is outside of the Zerfax bubble. So this is basically to kind of like just basically summarize what I'm essentially talking about here. This is basically how I've learned to perceive the fourth dimension, essentially. That because with each Zerfax is essentially a self-contained, infinite three-dimensional universe. And each one of us, each of the individuals here on the round table and in the chat right now, also exist in our own independent Zerfaxes, a part of the Zerfax. And because I noticed that with a lot of like occultism and meditation practices, they're always telling you to go inward. They very rarely, I guess probably some of them do. I'm probably wrong in this. I think maybe Franz Barden might have talked about this, but I don't see a lot of occultism talking about visualizing outward, about going sort of beyond, right? And I was thinking about your Franklin, you were talking earlier about your exercise where you expand your sense of self, where it's like you start off as yourself, you see yourself as being the entire planet, then the solar system, then the entire galaxy, then the entire physical universe. And then you get to that like meta sort of subatomic level where you kind of revert back to yourself and you start to see things as cells. Well, what I've kind of done, I kind of get to that point where I get to the universe, but instead it's like I take that universe and I put it inside of a snow globe, essentially. And then I take that snow globe and I kind of like duplicate it, and I make a copy of it, and then I duplicate it so there's like millions of them, and then I kind of put them all and jam them into one crystalline sphere, And that crystalline sphere is a Zarfex. So that's, and then I start thinking about Zarfexes, and I start thinking about like being as big as a Zorfex, right? And so that would be like an infinite, like the same paradigm, but now there's an infinite number of Zarfexes. And you sort of like keep going up and up and up. And it's sort of like you start to realize that you can keep going up, but there's a limit. But the farther you go up, the harder, the more difficult it becomes to conceptualize. Like you kind of, so what I do is I keep myself small as I go with this process. So there's like that sense of like, you know, how you relate to each object. And I kind of find that the higher level of density of consciousness of ideas and experiences, the harder it is for me to retain it all. But I find that with magical practice, meditation, working with magic, if I do that exercise again, I can go a little bit further than I did before. And with new knowledge and new understanding, I can then go further up, deeper and deeper into that sort of outer Zarfex mystery space. And I think what's really been helpful about this whole, you know, outer Zarfex sort of paradigm is I think what we're noticing right now in the world are a lot of old paradigms and a lot of old systems sort of deteriorating. A lot of religions are starting to show their cracks. A lot of our social institutions are starting to show the devilish sort of face that's hiding behind the mask. And in a lot of ways, we don't really feel like there's any kind of reality to stand on, right? It's like it feels like everything is corrupted. But I think by having that sense of space, of being able to go out into that extra dimensional world, it's given me like a sort of a sense of space and a sense of clarity about sort of understanding the sort of world. It's like I can take all these paradigms and I can take all the stuff we're talking about, and I can kind of look at it in this sort of this zoomed out kind of meta perspective, if you will. So I kind of went off on a lot of tangents there, but yeah, I just kind of wanted to bring that to the table because I feel like, you know, I know that, you know, it's hard to explain my system and it's, you know, confusing to, I mean, I guess it's not too confusing. I think once you get past like a lot of the weird terms, like it's fairly intuitive, but, you know, I think it's not just like some cool, you know, trippy thing, you know, sometimes I think like, is this just like, is there any substance to what I'm doing? Or is this just kind of like, you know, aesthetically occult kitschy or whatever? And I think one of the perspectives is by having that sense where it's like, I can sort of step outside of the universe, I can then kind of look back at it from a different perspective. And you realize, because then you're not, because I think one of the things I've realized about this world that we live in is that it can seem very confining. It can seem very, we feel very spiritually sort of like cramped and isolated and kind of like sort of like fused into sort of one like aspect of being. Whereas when you realize there's all these other worlds out there and there's all these other extra dimensions, now this world doesn't seem so confining anymore. It actually seems very small and insignificant. And that smallness and insignificance, you know, you can kind of gain some power over it and kind of conquer your fear of it. So.
Yeah, thank you. That was an amazing discussion there. I appreciate that, Cosmic. Also, right now we're going through this Pisces new moon where a lot of people have experienced that it's a time right now to cast out the things that are no longer serving us, the things that have become irrelevant in our lives, and kind of just a distraction that's kind of been anchoring us and holding us down. And I think a lot of that has been people are detaching from the false narratives that have been kind of attempted to be pushed down our throats and that have had people tied down for a long time. They're now reaching out as people are waking up around the world collectively, reaching out to new avenues of understanding. And with that comes the kind of walking away from the old broken systems that have kind of collapsed beneath us. And part of that has a lot to do with the fact that they've been brought into the light. And the thing about darkness is that it doesn't have a source. It's just hiding away and trying to stay in the dark. But once the light comes into the darkness, it becomes transmuted immediately and dissolves into nothing. So I think a lot of these power systems that have been set up based on control through ignorance are becoming powerless in the face of awakening into understanding. So it's really interesting to see how things are transforming right before our eyes right now regarding that.
That's really interesting. And to backtrack it, and you guys are throwing lovely wood on the fire, proverbially speaking. We're talking about like consciousness, and this is like the psychosomatic expression. And on a tangible level, I think the point that started the ball rolling down the hill that gathered all the stones together to produce a landslide of information to fill our bowl with ideas and thoughts and knowledge. When you were talking, Cosmic, was the idea of bones and feathers and bones. And that came back to Shinobi talking about his hair in the garden doing spider tricks. Spider hair. If it can climb the wall, no one can. Spider hair, spider. So, I'm feeling quite silly. Never leave your inner child behind. You guys are reminding me about that in the chat, by the way. Keep your little boy and your little girl close. I don't mean your other boy. I mean the little one, the one inside. And the idea of open eye meditation, it's a very interesting and important part of the tradition of opening ourselves to the universe etherically as well as astrally. I think when we go inwardly, we can more easily connect with the astral. When we go outwardly, we can more easily connect with the etheric. So it's quite an interesting distinction. And the etheric is where we can see the boundaries between things, and the astral is where we can see the things that are connected by fields. So they're two very, very different perspectives. One is the containers, the containment system, and the other one is the substance in the containment system. And but looking at like bones, for example, okay, if I look at this, I'd say like, okay, so what is bone? Bone is like a crystallized thing. It's like a crystallization. It's a crystal. It's a bone. It carries memory of how one thing becomes another thing. So it's about time. It's the time-related memories. Like if we can break it down, like fleshy, skinny bits, right, would carry memory of energy, of how that energy flowed through the particular energy that was flowing. Electricity, what kind, like let's think of electricity, like that would carry like the memory of thoughts that it took the shape of a thought. The thought is like an electrical impulse. Fluids would carry, and water would carry the memories of our feelings, right? Of our emotions, very subtle, resonant substance, where the reason is the breaking apart of those concepts, which are like emotionally, intelligently driven. The water would carry the imprint, the reason of the feeling, right? The actual imprint of the emotion. So we can sort of see like every different substance carries a different type or grade of memory. What an interesting concept. And even like, internal, like our emotions carry a different kind of memory, in the same way that our thoughts carry a different kind of memory. And everything is like sort of constructed of memory and different kinds of memory, and the different kinds of memory we perceive and experience and are aware of in different ways. So that's like quite an interesting concept. And I think this is where the fields of correspondence come from if we're working with magic, for example. Like what would we use? What particular substances for what particular grade of shift in consciousness we wish to achieve? If we wish to improve our memories, then somebody asked that question earlier, by the way, and I responded to it. You could take it. I gave an expression of a mystic path, which shamanism is a very mystical path. Let's not pretend it isn't. But an occult path would be different. So if I were to go back, like, let's say I go like in a time machine. I'm going, time machine. I'm going back 3.5 decades. I go back, and you ask me, then I'd be talking about rituals and using occult practices, right? To achieve the same thing that you can achieve with a mystic practice. With a mystical practice is a different kind of way of doing it. The occult way of doing it would be to see, well, what kind of memory do I want to improve? Do I want to improve my timeline memory? Then I would construct a ritual that's related to timelines, hair and bone, right? Certain gems related to Saturn's energy, sapphires. If I don't have sapphires, I'd use something. Get away with an amethyst. Go, but cheap. Go cheap because you don't need to spend your dough. Use sapphire. Use an amethyst. It's a cheap man's sapphire. You know what I mean? And find a way to get the right ingredients, and then align them in a particular way that makes sense with the sacred geometry that I'm working with, and find the names that relate to those particular frequencies through the web of correspondences, angelic names, archetypal names, various different frequencies, and pull those together, and then create a systemic use of all of these different implements. Make sure I do it at the right time, like where's the planets, what's going on, time of day, what energies or frequencies are on. Am I doing the right thing? Like I don't pull out a pen and paper in the middle of the night when there's no light and try and write, right? Pen and paper, you do it when the sun is up, when there's lots of light, it's clear days, lots of light. Okay, now's the time for writing. I don't decide, oh, it's nice and bright outside, I think I'm going to go to sleep. That's not how this works, right? There's every season has its time, and every time has its correct thing to be doing in that season. So from those broad sort of ideas of what to do in night and dark, there's a range of subtle things. And so you would find the right time, you would construct a ritual, you decide, well, what's the narrative that reflects what I wish to achieve, and how would that narrative play out in the play of my mind? And I would create a mind play, and something that I can do on the physical plane. And then I would construct a ritual using those particular materials at the right time of day, when the right planets are in the right zone, using the right words, especially the words that feel and resonate with the particular ideas that I'm wishing to achieve within myself. And I would take myself and externalize myself into a space around myself, maybe in the form of a circle. And then I would honor each aspect of myself, all four directions, and I would invoke the correct frequencies at each particular direction, so that I know this is the field of my inspirations, the field of my thoughts and my planning and organizing, this is the field of my emotional field, this is the field of my sensational field, and bring that to a state of balance and harmony, so that I can move my ritual through these different four fields, aspects of myself. And so I'll know where I want to work with particular invocations for particular directions, and which beings I'm going to be invoking, and how I'm going to achieve this goal. And then I would, within the circle of my externalized mind, I would create the changes that I wish to see within myself ritualistically, using the correct items. And then I would close that, and I would stamp on the ground, buddy. Give a girl a stamp on the ground, as to say, that's it, done. That's the end of this little story. And that resonant field would then vibrate out through the earth, out into the cosmos, into myself. And so that would be another way of changing my thoughts using matter. So you can see that, like, each item used in the ritual in such a way would carry its own particular resonance, and that resonance is essentially its own memory. And so you're taking different memories and putting them into a circle, and using those memories in such a way that I can work with the memory, different kinds of grades of memory within myself, to shape them in a particular way, so that I can produce a particular shift within my own consciousness field, changes within my own being that I wish to actualize, using the memories outside, which are just externalized objects. So that's like an occultist way of doing what you could do with a drum. I think the drum way just is so much funkier. I'm sorry, like once you discover the drum, you're like, what the hell was all that other nonsense about? It was so pointless. The drum is like it's its own. It does it all for you, and it does it with so much style that like everybody else is dancing. But But and then you end up moving with it. There's somatic elements that you would move out, gestures and feelings. So there's a somatic element to memory. Memory takes shapes, memory takes forms, and certain ideas and feelings and memories want to be expressed in particular ways. So bringing that back to tie that all in to what you were saying, you know, tying the feather to the bone, as it were, to create a wand. You were talking about meditation practices, and like that's one of the most profound. So the Rosicrucians, they don't practice dhyana, which is like formal, proper meditation, which is mystic path, right? Mystic path is just absorb your consciousness and allow the contraction and expansion to become the expressions of your being, and allow the breath to reflect the expansion and contraction, so that you can find that point between contraction and expansion, which is where the outside and the inside meet, and it's beyond the puppet that holds this meat. And so from the perspective of the Rosicrucian tradition, they tend to breathe in and breathe out. Their meditative practices are rather interesting, and it's a very powerful form of practice. It's meditating with your eyes open and your eyes closed, but your eyes are opening and closing, and they follow the cycle of your breath. That's what they do. This is how we do it. This is how we do it. So you're breathing in. What are you breathing in? Right? You're breathing out. What are you breathing out? Right? You're breathing in. Inspiration. What are you breathing out? The memory and the experience. Right? So you breathe in the astral and you breathe out the etheric. So you breathe in and you internalize. You breathe out and you externalize. Right? And so you work this externalizing, internalizing process like wheels on a bicycle. And the concentration is on inside of myself. Out. When I say inside, I mean the outside. And then outside of myself. And when I say outside of myself, I mean the inside. Okay, so this becomes double juxta. You guys got to roll with this because this is how this rolls. It's cute, it's sweet, it's rather sexy, even though it's incomplete. So the outside becomes the inside of my outside, right? And the inside becomes the outside of my inside. You got to see that. So you then play with the breath and experiencing the opening and the closing with different breaths. There's a whole lot of different ways that you can work with this particular energy. And so you're rocking in and you're rocking out. And the breath, you've done your necessary preparation for attaining a rhythmic breath. So your breath is rocking like a rocking horse, very slowly. And you're rocking out of yourself and you're rocking into yourself. And you're rocking out of yourself and you're rocking into yourself. But you're observing the process of rocking out and rocking in, and that there is this point of the sweet zone between the outward rock and the inward rock. We call it the house of rock. Sorry. And that's the house that rocks. And I'm going to, from this day forth, that meditative technique is called the house that rocks. And it's part of the house of rock technique empire. We'll do that sometime. I'll do that. I will definitely actually, it's a fun meditative technique. Maybe we should do that. Maybe we should be doing like, who of you would be interested in that? Is that something you guys are interested in? Doing group meditations? Group meditations? Like right here? Group meditation. What do you mean group meditation? I mean group, man. Group it up. So yeah, we could do that. We could all do it together, and that would be fun actually. We could do different sort of techniques, meditative techniques, and use that rocking meditation to get that sort of experience of the inner and the outer. And what you're talking about, Cosmic, is also it's a similar kind of a thing. It's more conceptually driven. So I'm working with somatic energies, Cosmic's working with conceptual energies. And you're going to get a different result from these two different meditative techniques. But both results will move towards a similar kind of a place, I think. I like, personally, when I look at the world, I like to see the dots. Connect the dots. Come on, let's see the dots. So I will look at a living thing, a plant, and I will, or you can look at your hand and you can see the space around your hand and be aware of the space around your hand and start to notice that there's a field, and the field is like moving, and then there's like little flowing bits flowing, and it's like an energy field. You start to see it literally, and then you see it's made out of little dots, and the dots are dancing, and they're all like, whoo, they got their own little rhythm going on. Each group of dots is dancing, like they've got loads of different soundtracks. It's like a whole mass of people, each with different like sound systems plugged into their ears, and they're all dancing in their own like rhythm, and they're dancing different rhythms, but they're all together dancing, and you see these different groups dancing. Look, there's the R&B crew, and they're mixed in. Imagine like one dance floor, everybody's wearing headphones, and some people are dancing to gabba, some people are dancing to trance, some people are dancing to house, some people are dancing to drum and bass, some people are dancing to R&B, some people are dancing to like I don't know, like folk music, and they're all dancing differently. That's like what you're seeing, like all these dots. They got like their own, like they got their own little grooves going on, and you notice that these dots are like vibrating, and that there's this fields and these different fields of resonant vibration, and they're all little dots, and you can get lost in those dots. And in the dots, there's glue. There's like a glue between the dots. It's like an luminous glue. And as you start to become aware of the luminous glue between all the dots, it's like the dots come in and go out. They come and they go. They come, they go. They come, they go. They come, they go. They're like little stars being born and being unborn. And the glue is what's left behind through the presence of the dot. Think of it as each one as a star being born. It's a good way of looking at it. And it's like a stargate, a mini stargate come and been, and it's left its tachyon radiation behind, and you can see that it's like a glue substance, and you can sort of, I got it in my hands. You can sort of pull it apart and play with it. It's like it's tactile. When you start to feel it, it's got a tactile presence, and when you start to see it, you become aware of it. You can touch it, you can shape it, you can move it, you can manipulate it with your thoughts. That's where it starts to become fun. But you'll notice it around the trees, especially sunrise and sunset. It's very powerful times. Just after sunset, just before sunrise, it's at its peak. So those are times that you can learn to see it. And once you learn to see it, you can't unsee it. But if you spend too much time seeing it, then you'll see it, and you won't see what like matters so much. So there's a point where you can overdo it, but that gives you like the etheric field, which is like a structuring field. That gluey stuff is like keeping the structure of everything in place. And then when you start to see that, you'll notice there's qualities hidden behind the field. That's a different field, and that's like colors. You go, what's that hidden behind that field? And you'll notice that's like a haze of color. And then behind that, there's other fields and other hazes of color, and there's like bands of color behind it. You see that particularly strongly when you gaze at the sun, and you do your sun gazing, and you notice the sun's got like bands around it. When you do it for a long time, and you like every day, practice, you start noticing there's different bands and circles around the sun, and each one's got its own like frequency, resonance, and its own color and its own quality. And so there are a lot of like ways to engage and to actually, for yourself, be able to recognize viscerally, actively, conceptually, on every level of being, that there is this connection between matter and what's going through this thing.
Yeah, I just want to jump back to when Cosmic was mentioning oneness, and the way I view it, which kind of connects to this, is that the oneness is the mind, which isn't in here. Like the all is mind, the all is mental, which is just another word for spirit. The all is spirit, and it's the spirit that weaves between all things. It's the spirit in which we're in. So I think that whenever I hear people saying oneness, I just kind of think of that we're all in kind of one thing, be it a separate universe or this universe or Zarfex. There's no separation between anything. There has to be a thread which weaves between all things, and I would call that spirit, or the mind, or mental. And it's with our mind that we can step beyond the matter and into other universes and bring, with our imagination, insights from other universes into this universe. And that's what I would also call the 3D to 5D, bringing the 5 density into the 3 density, using time, sort of moving through time, using time as the thread. Like Saturn is like the bones are ruled by Saturn, the structure. We can use the structure to sort of weave and move beyond time. And it's not escapism. It's not going from this universe to another, or going from 3D to 5D and ascending. It's more of kind of bringing other things into this realm. If that makes sense. And with memory and matter, I've been thinking that certain materials probably hold on to memories better than others. Like, for example, like wooden objects are more likely to hold on to memories than steel or plastic, because the reason I think this is, like, old buildings, like Victorian buildings, all made of wood and stuff like that, you go in there and you can kind of sense the energy. It feels old. If you go into a building that's made of plastic and steel in 100 years, I don't think there's going to be the same energy, especially when there's been like LED lighting, like really, really bright light in there, opposed to candlelight. So I do find that interesting, that this kind of memory that has kind of, you guys are talking about doctors earlier. Sorry, I'm jumping all over the place here. You were talking about doctors, and you used to have a family doctor. You used to go and see the doctor. I used to be the same one. They know your face. They can tell by your face the different symptoms you have. They, like Frank was saying, they can kind of connect different parts of you, of what's going on, your diet, exercise, this and that. Whereas now you go to the doctor and there's only just one. You see a different doctor every time, so they have no memory of you. So there's a separation created there, because it's the memory as the thread that connects all things. That's why I think. And also with the, I was going to say something else, but I've forgotten, so I'll pass the mic to someone else.
You know, you were talking about time a second ago, Shinobi. Franklin, I kind of wanted to share an image, because this is actually something that, this is kind of like the sort of like a puzzle that Sliz is kind of like thrown at me. Like, this is kind of like my current like lesson, and I kind of want to get some like some feedback from you guys to see if you have any ideas of like how to sort of interpret and make sense of this. I sent you a picture, Franklin, in the queue. Yeah, so I've been thinking about time and nonlinear causality, and I realized that, see, the red line, that's kind of your standard causality. You go from the past into the future, but then you have retroactive causality, where things go from the future to the past. So I define retroactive causality as like you have some kind of goal in the future, right, that orients you in the present. So in a sense, that is the future affecting the past in a causal sense. But what I've been trying to figure out is Sliz basically threw this concept of the distinction between outer time and inner time, and basically kind of saying something that outer time is kind of the time from outside the Zarfex, and inner time as related within the Zarfex. And you see here, this is kind of the symbol of the divine feminine in Zarfexology, which kind of represents sort of inner internalness and being. And then you have Zith, which is sort of the divine masculine, which represents sort of outward perception and expansion. And what I want to ask you guys is, and by the way, the colors of these lines have no significance. I just kind of like, put them on there so the lines look distinctive. But I'm curious if you guys have any thoughts as to what the orange and green lines represent here, because I mean, I have some ideas, but I kind of wanted to throw it at you guys to see if you had any concepts or feedback as, because I feel like if we can figure out what these other two lines represent, I think we can start to kind of develop a better understanding of sort of like how magic works from a causal sense. Because I think one of the reasons I've realized it's difficult for someone to take magical seriously and think of it as being real is that most people only think of life existing in this red line of causality. Like this is the only line. They don't consider, this blue line, but I consider that these green and orange lines are also in effect. And so I would imagine, like, if you're going up or down on this axis, so that would be like, time hasn't gone into the past or future, but your entire understanding of existence has changed. So it's something that's like the change. It seems like it's something that's always been there. Like it's like it's like, so I would think of this as like your understanding of the past and future has fundamentally changed. Like you had an idea of what you thought the past was, and now you have a new conception of the past. And so when you change your conception of the past, you actually move upward and downward in this time field. So I kind of want to just like pass the mic, and people in the chat can also throw out answers too.
Cosmic, could you zoom in on it a little bit so if people have phones, they can see it a bit better?
But basically, it's just the idea that the red line is moving from left to right, which represents standard causality. Then you have the blue line, which is future to past, and then you have the orange line that goes from inner time to outer time, and then you have the green line that goes from outer to inner. So the idea, I would think that the red and orange lines are more active time currents, right? Because, and then the retroactive, it's more passive and it's more subtle. It exists, but you don't necessarily notice it overtly. So I imagine that this green line is also subtle, and this orange line is more overt. So I don't know if you guys have any ideas that you could throw or spitball, because
Cosmic,
I'd be interested in hearing your feedback.
Cosmic, what OS are you running?
Windows.
Windows. Can't you just full screen that? Like if you full screen it, it's going to make it a little bit bigger. If you hit the square button.
I think I can zoom in. Does that help?
But what happens if you full screen it and that little boundary goes away? Yeah, that's probably cool.
Okay.
Is that better?
All right, maybe this is a little bit better.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, it's not the right. But I just kind of threw this diagram like just a few minutes ago, so it's a little bit sketchy. But so I think the idea is like you.
Sorry, I just want to say, well, first before me or Franklin give our input, because I have something to say, but I'm sure Franklin does as well. Why did you put orange and green?
I just wanted a color that's distinct from red and blue, just so I feel like if each line is a different color, it's like I can conceptualize it sort of differently. It doesn't look all exactly the same. So there's no there's no specific reason I chose the color. It's just sort of arbitrary, but I did choose that warmer colors to represent more active currents. So from past and the future, it's a more obvious thing. And I used cooler colors for the retroactive causality because I figure it's a more passive time current, so it's not as notable. So I figured a colder color would make more sense for that.
Well, my input is that orange has the largest range of color, and it's more of an outwards. If that makes sense, it's more of like it's more of an outwards burst color, like orange. And then the green, I have heard somebody say that green absorbs light better than black, but I'm really not sure about that. But there must be a reason leaves are green, because they absorb light. So the green is the absorption, and the orange is the biggest range of light. So it's to do with absorption, but I'm sure Franklin has more stuff to add to that.
Yeah, unless you got more to, unless you guys have more to say.
No, all good.
That's
It's just for me, it signals absorption, whether it's outwards or inwards.
I won't get into the specific colors because you haven't specified the colors, right? Cosmic, but like the what they represent polarity wise.
Yeah.
And I would almost just use 2 colors. How's that for a concept?
Yeah, that
And
could
I would
work better,
represent
too.
the outward time, and personally, just because I'm moon in Taurus and I'm very specific about things, I would probably have the outer on the bottom and the inner on the top. But anyway, it's non-clutchy, that it's pointless. I would see a relationship between the red line that comes from the past towards the center and the orange line that ascends towards the outer, right? And so I would see a relation between that, right?
Mhm.
That is one line as well. So I would see that the lines are splitting. That there are really only 2 things, but the 2 things are splitting into 4 things. It's sort of like a very subtle ood towards yang yin. This looks like a yang yin to me, by the way. It's a yin yang to my mind. So I would see that, and then I would also see that the retroactive moving from the future to the past, which is represented as blue. I would see that also as related to this descending the green line. If that makes sense.
Mhm.
I would see the green and the blue. So in other words, the future moving towards the past also happens to move towards the inner. So I would construct those lines as having like a scaletic. That's where it splits into 2 parts. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's like the curve again, you know? How things sort of like curve,
Yes.
right?
Exactly, because it wouldn't be an angular thing. It would be a curve. It would be a curvature. So it makes me think of those Celtic knots a bit, doesn't it? Can you see now what these people were at when they were like what they were trying to explain to us with those Celtic
Yeah, definitely.
crosses and
I'm
knots?
not really familiar. What's a Celtic knot? If you could just kind of give like a little TLDR of it.
It's bloody hard to explain with words, man. I can try and find a picture.
Do you know what's weird? I was gonna share a Celtic tree, no, which is a very similar concept to this, and I'll talk about why in a bit. But it is a very bizarre synchronicity that you've shared this, and I didn't see the connection between the Celtic knot, but now I do, and that's very interesting.
Okay, let's see if I can get a picture. I'm getting wound up on this damn thing. Give me 1 moment, people. 1 moment. Just uno momento. How many moments? Uno. Just the 1 moment. He only needs 1. 1 is enough. Come on, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so let's pop it up and I'll show you what I mean as an image on the screen. Share the screen. Not to that. Not to this. Not to this. No audio. Okay, so there my image is loaded up. Now, where's Cosmics? Okay, so we're going to remove Cosmics from. Don't delete your picture, yeah, Cos. Keep it
Got
there
it.
because we can bounce it back and forth. Do you see what I'm getting at here with this image?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like that's basically what I'm seeing.
basically a vids or facts, essentially.
Yeah, where all of those 4 is actually one thing, but that one thing is in its passive mode, active mode, passive mode, active mode, going around in a circle like a spiral, but actually representing those 4 things, which is actually 2 things operating in 2 directions, active and passive. This is why I describe it as to me seeming. So that's just an example of what I was seeing, and I suppose what I was well, here's the thing that he was going to show us. You can see there's a whole lot of that going on here, right? These guys got creative, but it's the same idea. It's just it's showing how this idea is multiplicity. It's not just one thing. It's all of those things is one big thing that's creating all of those multiplicity. So that's where did your thing go, Cosmic? There's Cosmic's thing. So yeah, that's my sort of take on it. I don't know if Indy's still with us.
You don't know where he went.
Oh, well, I'm glad he hasn't been removed. Last time he was like, we were like, where's Indy? Indy was on the show, but but he wasn't. We were like, where's Indy? We were thinking that Indy fall asleep. What happened? You know,
I was working out. I love what you guys. Yeah, I'm listening in. I love what you guys are talking about. I have my own interpretation of inner time and outer time too, but I'm just listening to all your wonderful perspectives right now, just taking it in.
Well, I'd like to hear it, Indy, because I need all the feedback I can get. This is basically like a puzzle I'm trying to figure out and solve. So I'm kind of like getting feedback from other people to see if other people have insight into figuring out, because I'm trying to really understand these two concepts. This is something that Sliz is kind of like saying, like, this is the key that like kind of developing the understanding of nonlinear time by understanding this vertical time vector. So your input would be greatly appreciated.
Non-linear time too. I have so much deep insight about this from personal experiences of transcending time, the fact that I have no concept of time, and the fact that I've always researched, like, how can I develop one, or is it possible? And I've learned so much about what time could be and is. But I'm going to start briefly with the 3 aspects of radical honesty that are undeniable truths that have not been known to the collective. That's an actuality for everyone beyond our subjective realities that we all share. All right, so there's something that's happening right now inside my mind. This is always happening for everyone. There's something happening right now inside my body. This is also happening for everyone all the time. And there's something happening right now outside of my body and mind. And this is also happening for everyone all the time, perpetually. And we're in the ever-present wow of the perpetual now, which is inescapable. Now, there are 3 delusions which we have been socialized to believe in and all considered to be reality. The planning mind, the idea of the past or the future being something that is real beyond our imagination. The past and the future were events that happened in the now, or are going to be events that happen in the now. But our memory or idea of them is the delusion. We tell ourselves a story of the past. We tell ourselves a story about our expectations of the future. Some people may even have premonitions. They have expectations of something that's about to happen. But these stories and expectations are really just like the husk, the surface of like what really went on. It's like you see the water, you see the surface of the water. But the water has depth. And the depth of our past, and the depth of our future, the depth of our premonitions go way beyond the very surface of what we consider them to be. And so once we can restory our lives, we can restory what we think the future holds, what we think the past represented, what events transpired. And there's like infinite potential to go deeper into what actually happens and what happened. Now, this is just the planning mind. This is the first delusion. The second delusion is the categorical mind, the idea that we can fully understand something from a brief explanation or definition. This idea is preposterous. First of all, a lot of our expectations of what we define something as are constantly being redefined and considered to be completely false. So even though we think we understand something completely, usually that assumption and ideation is usually either fraudulent or just the mere surface of things, which just one small aspect of the infinite aspects that can be discovered. And so if people were able to look past this, they could see something with new eyes all the time and see new aspects and new natures of things, rediscover everything anew all the time. But it has a lot to do with like our memory. We get stuck in our memory since our memory is there to call upon. it's hard for us to use our consciousness. We only use our consciousness 5% of the time, but 95% of the time, we're using our basic assumptions that are based on previous experiences. So these things are programmed into our mind. And so the categorical mind is basically limiting us from seeing things anew and seeing deeper aspects of everything we see. So then the final one, the final delusion, is the programming mind. So we are programming ourselves through our own self-judgments and through our own assumptions, and other people program us by judging us and casting programming onto us through socialization and various things. And we even take in like judgments that we don't even resonate, that have dissonance. And when we, by doing that, we create an inner conflict, which can create depression and anxiety and low self-esteem and stress and emotional burdens. And so the programming mind is basically something that can become really detrimental to us. But not everyone is doing the things that others do, where we take in the dissonant ideas. For people like myself, which are extremely rare, like an INFJ or an INFP, with strong intuition and strong rationality, we basically, well, not take in the judgments that we don't validate. And you don't have to you don't have to validate the judgments that you don't agree upon. So basically, like people like myself, it's hard for us to care what other people think, which becomes a detriment to a degree, because we never really taken into account the perspectives of others that are beyond our own. So this makes us it's hard for us to see things which is considered in the Johari window, where there's 4 panes, things that I understand that other people don't understand, things that I understand and other people understand, things that other people understand about me, but I don't understand about me. And the final window is things that nobody understands about me, not even myself, that can still be discovered. So the thing is about the programming mind is like we all have a possibility to learn more and to expand and become ascended more than we have been, because of the limitations that have been put upon us by trying to integrate the perspectives of others and trying to be stuck in our own perspective of ourselves, which is limited and not able to grow. So it was kind of a long-winded discussion about the radical honesty aspect, but basically, since things are always happening right now, I basically can identify with this completely, and it makes so much sense to me, and I teach this a lot. But I have no concept of time. To me, I don't believe in time. I feel like the future is pretend. And so, especially with weather reports, like, oh, it's going to rain. I'm like, yeah, we'll see about that. Especially, I live in the mountains, so like there always is weather changing. If it's supposed to do one thing, it might do that for 15 minutes, but they say here in the mountains, wait 15 minutes and see what really happens. And then, things are always shifting here. So it's like not a permanent event. A lot of times it's a lot of things just move. Something will happen a little bit. But there's some benefit to these things. But I like to be spontaneous, and to me, it's better to imagine the possibility of the future being different than we expect it to be. The past being completely separate from what we imagined it to be. And so by having this perspective, I've been able to see shifts in the timeline from like doing personal self-mastery work. Like I'll change things inside myself. Like I need to let go of this thing that no longer serves me. And I simultaneously feel that my past life also made that same shift simultaneously, because time is not existent, but all things happen at once at the same time. And so when me and my past and future lives all make the same shift together at the same time, the state of existence changes, because the butterfly effect from my past life altered the state of reality in which I find myself. And then I can remember both timelines just by a gist. But I noticed that I remembered there was like a huge Holocaust, and like the whole world became infected with radiation poisoning, and there was a nuclear winter, and it was like horrendous, and so much wildlife died, and it was horrible. But then I shifted something in myself, and that was undone. And so I feel like time is way different than people have been taught or have even imagined. But they say that what I found in my research is that People can count time because time is a delusion. It's a slave mind aspect. It's for following other people's orders and schedules. That's the external time. It's like supposed to be consistent to everybody, and people can either count it by a tick, 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 or it can be numbered 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you count it by numbers, you can't really count time in the back of your mind. If you have to keep track of time, everything else goes out the window. People that can count time by a tick, they can keep track of time in the back of their mind and have a natural sense of time as how much time has passed, how much time they have left. For example, like at work or whatever they're doing. So for me, I just never wanted to keep track of time with numbers because I want to think about other stuff. And so in a lot of ways, it's prevented me from having a planning mind. So I don't expect things to happen the way they're planned to be. I understand that things are going to happen spontaneously, and life is what happens while we're making plans. So this makes it so that I'm like usually fashionably late to stuff. I'm like not that reliable as being like exactly on time. But in the South, like people don't even show up. So I tell people like I will show up. Usually like early or on time, especially if I'm doing something professional, I'll make sure to like drop what I'm doing and go. But if I have to do something casual, I'll kind of like dawdle and like take my time to do stuff. But basically, like internal time is like you do what you need to do, regardless of like what other people are pressuring you to do. That's what it means to me. Like a lot of people will like drop everything important that they need to do for their personal health and like hygiene and like clean their house and organize everything. And they'll just drop it all and like leave everything a mess. Their health, their mind, their house, like a total like disaster. And then they'll just run over to like do obligations to other people that they put first. And so like their finances might be good, but like their whole like life at home is like a nightmare, and their health is degraded, and their home is like filthy. And so like they always tell me like, oh, I do clean that up like at some point, like once a week or once a month or something. Some people tell themselves that, but never do. So I usually just clean up for people. Like I live in the now, which is something like you don't see. And so when people say be here now, I'm like, what about like learning to like have an imagination about like things beyond the now, which is like something has been hard for me. So you know, I have a lot of perspective on this stuff. I could go on for days, but basically the external time is about other people's time, pressuring you. Internal time is your own time and needs, like focusing on them without any pressure on other people's perspectives and not caring about what other people think.
Yeah, it sounds like you kind of exist in the one of these vertical time vectors, Indy, instead of the horizontal ones. Like you're perpendicular to the past and the future. That's actually one of the spells in Fey magic, is to sort of like switch to like a perpendicular sort of time frame like that by sort of like taking reality and like shifting it 90 degrees in a different direction, essentially. But yes, so yeah, that's cool, man.
Yeah.
But so the way I've been thinking about this lately, so I think about this as like at a more meta level, right? So like I'm thinking like in terms of causality of like the entire universe, right? So the past, I'm thinking like this is sort of like the Big Bang, the beginning of the universe, like from a physical standpoint, and that's one sort of vector of causality. Then you kind of have the idea of sort of the ideal or the potential future that, you know, beings want that sort of influence the past. And I look at inner time and outer time as sort of two different eternities, right? So I've been thinking about the idea that, you know, what we think of as eternal is not as eternal as we assume it is. It's more like a kind of a weird spherical procession of time. So I think of like inner time as sort of like, you know, something that goes from the inside of the Zerfax outward. Then outer time is basically stuff that comes from outside the Zerfax inward. So it's like there's two different like eternities, like one from the Zarfax nucleus and the other from the Zorfax nucleus, that kind of put it together. But the reason I kind of brought it up with you guys is I kind of wanted to sort of bring it down to more like, you know, I guess more down to earth like perceptions, and see if I can like come up with some other ideas, because it's like I still don't have this like fully figured out, but it's like this kind of like this outer time, inner time. It's like, all right, this is a clue. So, I mean, in a lot of ways, this system, it's like that I've been working on, is it's almost kind of like a video game in the sense that there's like a puzzle you beat the puzzle, and then you sort of go to the next level, which is a slightly higher level of difficulty. So there's kind of like this like progression aspect of it. But I think it's important to kind of understand inner and outer time, because I think it's kind of like, if you don't have a sense of inner and outer time, if somebody changes your past or your future or alters it, there's not going to be any part of you that's going to be like, wait a minute, this is wrong. This isn't the correct timeline. This is a contradiction. And because of that, you don't necessarily because you don't have that. But I think when you become a mystic, I think that, by just like a general nature, you understand this third vector of time, this sort of like eternal. But what I've noticed with like this occult psychosomatic connection, and how there's kind of this weird disparity between kind of like a spiritual paradigm and a materialist one, is I think that you kind of look at that, like you could say that the inner time is kind of more of that being, that more materialist sort of like eternality, and then the outer time being the eternality of the mystery, sort of, because the idea in Zarfexology is that it states that existence is sort of a two-ness. It's a sort of a masculine and a feminine, and that by understanding this sort of this bi-local kind of multiplicitous existence, you're able to sort of understand higher dimensions, right? Because, if you only see things as being three-dimensional, you never are able to understand the universe as having a kind of a fourth dimensional membrane around it. And like once you understand higher dimensional membranes, then you can kind of go outside of it. So the idea is the outer and inner time sort of vectors are basically, so past and the future is kind of like the time that exists within the Zerfax, and then outer time is sort of out of it. So that's just kind of like a basic rundown of sort of what I've been sort of thinking about and working on sort of recently. So, because I know I kind of talk about like the basics of Zarfexology, but I also sometimes kind of get little sneak peeks into sort of like what my current projects are.
Shinobi, do you have more you want to throw at this picture?
Not at this picture, but I do have some more along this line of thinking in time.
I'll try and keep this
Sure.
image as short as I can. I noticed you've turned this into a cosmic egg, which is interesting. I tell you what I would do, just for the synchronous. I would turn this into a depiction of the four elements. Actually, cosmic, yes. This is how you can use it for actual like magical work. I'd turn it into a circle. I would change the orange to yellow, just for the sake of convention's sake. Yellow, the sky, the sun's in the sky, the color of like that light coming out of the sky, that yellow bright expression of information. And I would these triangles here, these triangles would become expressions of alchemy, right? The outer circle would be the representation of how and what you're calling outer time here, I would be going outside of this universe, which is inside of me conceptually, right? This is as a concept. And what you'll call inner time here, I would be saying going into the atomic me, which is the physical matter. Okay. So like that's how I would consider the contraction in towards a point of matter inwards, and the outwards, the spiral outwards into pure thought consciousness. That's just how I would conceptualize the circle as being showing that there is a connection and a cycle between the thought and the matter, and the expression of Jupiter on the top and the impression of Saturn on the bottom. And then I would, like I said, I would express, for example, moving from the left to the right, and moving the top to the bottom. I would change the a little bit. So, for example, where you've got the green line on the right hand side, I'd put it on the left hand side for the bottom, so that the green one on the bottom, so the red would go that way, and it would come out at the bottom on green, right? So, for example, and the green would be not the green specifically, but it would be the yellow, because I would have switched over the orange and the green. So the green's on the left, and I'll explain to you what I mean. So it would come from the left, moving to the right, and then it would move downwards, right? Although no, you could as easily just put the way you've got it here. You see, when you're talking about inner time, I'm talking about that's going into matter. So people remember when I say in, I mean in towards matter. It's like when you talk about the sea, when the sea's coming in, the sea's coming in. When the sea's going out, the sea's going out. It's that concept. I used to have to wrap my head around it as a little boy when I was fishing with my dad when I was like, 6 years old or whatever. But so I would then have that moving from the left to the right at the bottom, the red, and then I would have the yellow that's moving down towards matter, right? Then I would have on the other side of that yellow, right? I would have the concept of the green that's moving up, right? The next one, because then I've switched the bottom green to the left and the bottom orange to the right. And then that bottom orange to the right would be continuing the flow to the right of the red, right? And then the that red would actually touch the boundary. And the blue would touch the boundary because it would be returning that current. And that current would then go over the circle, right? And the circle would then continue upwards, which would be the orange continuing upwards from the green. And then the bottom words on the left-hand side, the green would then be on the left, and it would be then descending downwards towards. Then this outer circle, I would color code with those colors. So I would show that it would give curvature to it. Does that make sense, Cosmic? Because you've got a circle in the center.
Yeah, exactly.
And that circle would then give curvature. So the curvature would then show the color of the red moving towards the green, going down. And it would show then the orange moving up. The upward movement of the orange towards the red, right? And that would then show this elemental relationships between this passive and this negative. And then the same for that. And then where there's a space between the red and blue on either side, I'd probably use a combination of those two colors. I'd probably use like a purple. Where there's a combination between orange and blue, I'd probably combine the orange and the blue, the orange and the green.
Kind of an idea. He's taking this like.
And there's a reason for all this. I'll show you what I'm talking about. Then you would have an elemental sign in the center, right? And that elemental sign in the center would be bound by a circle in the center, but the circle on the outside is the same circle as the circle on the inside. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that means that time is non-linear. I hope you're following me here. The circle on the inside is the same circle on the outside.
Would you associate with like the past, future, outer time, and inner time? I'm kind of curious how you would. I have an idea. Like here, what would you say?
Well, I mean, I would take the current moving towards the future, and I would take the current moving towards matter, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I would say what matter is receiving. Let's just say that these elements, right? Like the consciousness. So the vertical plane is a plane of consciousness, right? And the left and right plane is a plane of material change. So the vertical plane is the consciousness change of time, and the left right one is the material change of time, and where the consciousness change of time meets material change of time. And that the circle around the outside encapsulates everything, but it recreates itself on the center, and that's the same circle. In the center you'd have the elements. So in terms of the elemental structuring, I would say that that which is going towards the pure mental, right, would be the element of air, right? That which is going towards the pure physical would be the element of earth. That which is coming from the past would be the element of water. That which is going towards the future would be the element of fire, right? That's just how I would notate it outwards. And then I would show the relationship between what's moving towards the future, which is fire, and what is towards the physical, which is earth. And earth and fire would have that relationship, but there would be an opposite relationship between fire and air, right? Because fire and air feeds fire, right? Fire produces earth. So I would coordinate these in that way, so that you can get an understanding that there's this profound relationship between the matter, the physical inner time, what you're calling inner time, what I'm calling contraction towards Saturn, contraction toward form, contraction towards atoms, and the future, which is also, in a sense, a contraction towards form, a contraction towards matter. And the past is a expansion from thought, in the same way that outer time would be an expansion towards thought. Does that make sense to you? So that the left side is polarized with the top side, and the bottom side is polarized with the right side, with the top and the bottom having the perspective meanings that I'm inferring upon them, where inner is matter and outer is consciousness, even though we've been taught an inverted version of that. And we look at things, but what we don't realize is our eyes turn everything upside down anyway, and then turn it right side up. So there's this sort of double juxtaposition where we think that we are on the outside, but we're actually on the inside. I hope that makes sense.
No, I think you're onto
then,
something interesting here, Franklin, because what you're essentially implying is that sort of these horizontal lines represent the kind of the more material, deterministic aspects of reality, and the vertical lines represent more of the free will, conscious agency, sort of using your imagination and kind of coming up with a spiritual different interpretation. Yeah, like, okay, this kind of adds a little bit more insight to this concept. So I appreciate that. And
the circle represents that all of this comes from one thing and is one thing, even though it's differentiated. Does that make sense?
Well, the idea is this is simply the it's specifically a type of so basically in Zarfexology, the time is sort of like measured in Zerfaxes. So the first dimension is just sort of one Zerfax, and it's just sort of one causal kind of line. But then it kind of goes into groups of 4. So once it's multiplied by 4, you get to sort of the first like level of nonlinear time, which is essentially this diagram. So the idea would essentially be that each individual Zerfax would have its own sort of different versions of these time frames. So basically the idea is the red and blue lines are sort of insular to the Zerfax itself, whereas the other, the outer time is more causality that comes from Zerfaxes external to that. So the external Zerfax is making an impact on sort of reality, because I'm thinking about like magic in terms of causality, and I realized that if you try to look at it in a sort of deterministic kind of way, and looking at it only from the causality of, being from the past to the future, a lot of the idea of magical manifestation doesn't really make sense from that particular context. But I think that's also why when you have a lot of these scientists who will look at studies of the paranormal and still be skeptical of it. I think they're skeptical for this exact particular reason, because they're only trying to understand causality from this one particular perspective. Whereas I realize when you actually manifest something, magically, you almost kind of realize at a certain point it makes sense that it wouldn't be, because if you could explain it in this kind of deterministic fashion, then it's not really magic anymore, is it? Magic seems to work at this kind of meta level where it seems like the change has always existed. And so if it manifests in that way, then you can't really sort of use a kind of a logical, rational experiment. You can't explain it in a way that makes sense to a kind of a standard skeptical materialist, because it's operating in a vector of causality that's completely outside of their perception.
I'll show you here another thing. Your triangle in the center.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I'm seeing. I'll show you what I'm seeing. A different way of representing an idea. So now we get a new way of understanding this sphere of these elements, right? Like relating to cosmic time, which is something that you won't find in books, right? It's interesting how this all couples towards each other. And you'll notice the air element in the Chinese I Ching, it's got to do with the 3 lines and this broken line, right? So the broken lines and the fixed lines, the lines that are broken, the trigoms that are cut. If you look at the I Ching, you'll see that that's representing how these triangles are formed. So your air element is broken, your fire element is pointing up, but it's unbroken. Your water element is pointing down, but it's not broken. Your earth element is pointing down, but it is broken. So now let's go back to your thing. And can you see what you've got here, what you've put here inadvertently without really maybe trying specifically, or maybe you have tried specifically, that you've put in the center there is you've put in a triangle, right? And if you look at that triangle, what I'm seeing in that triangle is I'm seeing a red triangle, and superimposed within that red triangle, right, is a green triangle, right, for the sake of complementary color refraction. And then that background would be green, although it might be actually better to have it as a small red triangle on top of a bigger green triangle on a circle that represents a red circle. So you were talking about which colors would go with the directions. You would design 4 different circles, and each circle would represent a different aspect of cosmic time, and how that time works on a different aspect of our being, because time is like really an expression of consciousness, is really an expression of matter, is really. So they should by right then be the time that relates to the inspiration, the time that relates to our thoughts, the time that relates to our emotion, and the time that relates to the physical sensation of our senses. So you would then have 4 of these circles, and one circle would be focused upon the sensation of the senses, the other one would be focused upon the emotions, the other one would be focused upon the thoughts and the ideas, and the other one would be focused upon the instinctive currents of inspiration. And this one, what I'm seeing is an instinctive current of inspiration, and that way you would see that the fire and the water, the fire and the air are fundamentally connected. So then you could have the fire on the top for fire, and for air you could have the air on the top for air, if that makes sense. And so they would change positions, and all the colors and all the codings would change as well to go with it, to show that the relationship is slightly different on each different level. So you would then be creating 4 different fields. Like, what do you call them? You've got a Zerfax, and then you've got a bigger thing, and then you've got a bigger thing and a bigger thing. Am I right or wrong?
Yeah.
What do you call? So now you've got different scales that you can represent. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. I can see that.
And you've got 4 different things to represent 4 cosmic scales of order.
4 sort of membranes of the self. So you have like the triangle, which represents sort of one Zerfax membrane. Then you have the second triangle. then you have the smaller circle, which represents sort of the gate Zerfax. And then the larger circle that it exists in represents the Zarfax that it's a part of.
And notice that in the center with the fire, like if you even just using basic alchemical tools, you've already put it in here. That's the fire. If you then take that triangle, and that triangle is then blue, and you push that blue triangle inverted downwards, and you move that blue triangle that's inverted down so that the down point is actually touching the bottom, it creates a barrier in the middle of the triangle, right? Do you see what I'm getting at here?
Yeah, this particular triangle is called the I-Zerfax. It's essentially the Zerfax that represents the self. And actually, according to the system, it's actually supposed to be white. Because the other Zerfaxes, they do have color associations, like the Kid Zerfax is green, the Vid Zerfax is purple, et cetera, and they all have different relations with that. So, and the reason it's white is because that way it has the potential to have any particular color, and one can have an infinite variety of different types of cells. So basically, the I-Zerfax is kind of like, it's also this causality map is also about sort of the creation of not just the like things, but also of the conscious self, in that the self is not just, spawned from the past into the present, but that we've also been conceived of in the future and retroactively brought back to the time that we currently exist. And then the inner and the outer time represents the kind of the eternal sort of realm that we came into, that we existed in sort of before we're in this sort of physical space. So this also represents kind of in a way, like in terms of reincarnation, it's not like, if you, like a lot of people think reincarnation, like on the standards, like you go for reincarnation 1, reincarnation 2, and you kind of just go on like a linear line like this. But what actually, it seems that when you have a reincarnation, it's more kind of like, it's not like it's more like you start from here and then you start from here, and you both converge from both sides to get to the center. So it's like both the past and the future are sort of converging together to create the self in the current sort of time frame. It's not like, because you see in a lot of ways what this diagram is showing is that these are different. So it's like, it's basically saying that, oh yes, it's true that there is a vector of linear time that exists, but this sort of retroactive time vector also exists, sort of running parallel to it, if that makes any sense, right? So, yeah.
Shinobi's been so patiently waiting, brother. What were you going to throw at us?
All good. I've shared a couple of images. Would you be able to share the one I've called Zarfax, which isn't a Zarfax?
Yeah, man. And Cosmic, I love your picture. I love your idea, man. It's really cool. The one on the bottom, yeah?
Yeah, I just found that image because it sort of reminded me of the triangle in the center of the time. It's just like a kind of infinite, has no beginning, has no end. I just saw that with the two triangles in the middle of that time graph. Yeah, would you be able to share the image of the tree? Because I think it might help to like have an image like as I'm talking. I love sharing images when I talk, to have a kind of visual element of pretty like abstract ideas. But so when I view time, as well, I can use the picture of like a dragon that I call the time dragon. That the tail of the dragon is a tale that has been told in the past. And the word past sounds like psst, like a whisper. The tale is just a whisper in the wind that has come to pass that you hear in the present. And then the head of the dragon is to heed a warning, like a head of time that you see into in the future. And this is foresight. The body of the dragon is the Bodhi, which is the present, which is waiting to be unwrapped. So I quite like to use that sort of like imagery when I'm looking at time, is like just using the etymology of like a tale being told in the past, and a whisper is the past, is the past, and then that kind of like our head can become full of whispers of things that have happened in the past. Some can be useful, but not always. And it can be useful to have some foresight and to see into the future, but not always. But it is always good to remember to be in the present moment.
Hi.
Okay, go away. I've already said night. Do you know what?
Good night.
I-
Sleep well.
No, don't be nice to them. I've been out there. I've had a lot of time with them, and I've waited a long time to speak. And I've purposefully gone in, sat with them, and I've said night to them and told them to not come in here and disturb me because I knew I was going to be saying something shortly. So yeah, I mean it's all well and good for them to come and say hello and stuff, but when I've told them not to, that's crossing a boundary. So yeah, I do feel mean, but you've got to have boundaries. So
Dude,
you know.
you should have seen me ripping my son a new one today, bro. Talk about boundaries. Dude, you got to have boundaries, man.
Yeah,
I completely get where
Yeah.
you're coming from.
yeah, and that kind of leads me into my next point here, because as I've been making notes, I've numbered them, and I've got 5. That was the first thing I wanted to say. The second is that time is the seam of the tapestry. And what do I mean by that? Like, time is just like how something seems, and like our perception of how something seems can change over time. And a tapestry needs a seam. It needs an end, or a boundary, but that boundary can always be dissolved or crossed. And then also, like, the seams is sort of like is what weaves the tapestry as well. Like time weaves this realm. Like, we're in time, we're moving through time. You say to people, do you remember that time we did this? And then I wanted to mention with foresight and forethought, the 4 rivers came to mind. I can hear Ori in the background shouting, "I hate you, stupid idiot." So yeah, the 4 rivers. I tried finding an image earlier. I don't know if anyone's seen this image of like the black rock in the center of the earth, with the 4 rivers that flow into it. But anyway, this is representing like magnetic north. I've completely lost my train of thought now, which is really annoying, because I have to go in a minute. But what was my point with all of this?
This was the point.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to share that image for Cosmic's benefit, just to see if it intrigued him, related in any way to the 2 pyramids in the center of his graph of time. But yeah,
Can you see the cube hidden here?
the what?
The cube hidden here.
No.
Like, if you like look at it carefully, right?
I think I see what you're talking about.
It's like 3 dimensions. It's representing the 3 dimensions, right? Of like length, breadth, and depth, which is like the fundamentals of a cube, isn't it?
It's
An
also
interesting
basically an object that really, in a sense, can't technically exist. Like, the geometry of it is technically impossible. I mean, you can technically kind of make it look in real life, like, but it's like usually like an illusion. It's not like fully connected. Like, I've seen that done before, but that's kind of it's interesting about the object, is that the shape is that you can't. It's really imperceptible because it's 3-dimensional, but in kind of a strange sort of way. I always found that this particular type of triangle very fascinating for that reason.
if my thoughts come back to me, I'll let you know.
You know, probably hearing your little boys carrying on in the background's made you emotional. I completely relate. Who were they? Are they having a fight? Are they arguing with each other?
No, Ori was shouting, saying, "You stupid idiot! I hate you."
To who?
To me, he's just shouting.
Oh,
like, in the other
right.
room. Yeah.
Right. So that's got
So-
oh, someone's gonna get it, buddy.
Yeah.
Woo-hoo! Like something's gonna get confiscated big time. Like
Yeah.
TV rights. What TV rights? You've got TV? You kidding, man? Desserts. You talking about desserts to your father? You know,
Well,
it's gonna be one of those.
he's allowed to watch YouTube after school one day of the week.
He
I
used
would
to be allowed to.
Yeah, damn straight.
He used to be allowed to.
Yeah, if he was watching anything which was actually beneficial for him, it might be fine. He might be allowed to watch more, but the absolute crap he watches on YouTube, and we let him for an hour because he's just gonna watch it at somebody else's house, and there's some stuff we don't let him watch anything, but he just watches the most stupid, mindless stuff, but it's only for an hour, but not this week.
My kid is far too educated for YouTube. He's figuring out, without anyone teaching him, he's figured out how to change settings and how to like he changes his mouse. I don't know how he learned this. He's been playing on the computer and he's trying to override dad's settings to try and like get behind to install apps that dad doesn't want installed. And he's trying to figure out how to crack passwords. And in that process, he's learning how to do all sorts of stuff. Like, do you know it took me a while to figure out how to change my mouse? Like I had to Google it. He just figured it out. Like so it's pretty scary as they get older, brother. They get very clever and they start figuring out things. And he knows far too much about horror. His fascination is with horror. And I'm like, seriously, dude, of all the things? No, horror is his fascination. And total crap. But I think like maybe it's like this. Maybe children want to introduce themselves to the zeitgeist. And maybe the zeitgeist is idiocy. And maybe they want to be in the world and they have to develop like an etheric body in the world. And that means like they got to get some kind of idiocy imprint to actually be in the zeitgeist of the world. Otherwise, they're so disconnected from the world, they don't know what the world is. And in that, the easiest way to do that is to watch the most mind-bendingly stupid, numb nonsense, because that way they are like, right, so this is what's going on in the world. They want to know, don't they? They it's like an animal. It's hungry to figure out like what's going on in the world. Well, what is this world? How does it work? And unfortunately, we are living in an extremely mindless, dumbed down society. And so maybe some part of the kids want to experience that. And we as adults are like, no, don't go there. Maybe they have to go there in order to know what it was so that they know it's shitty.
Yeah. You guys were talking earlier about meditation, and I didn't mention this earlier, but I don't really meditate. I'd be very interested in group meditation though, because sometimes I'm like, oh, maybe I should meditate tonight, and then I just like go to bed and read and go to sleep, and I don't. But what I do is I mediate. So I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure it is a meditation, but you guys were talking about meditating with your eyes open or your eyes closed, or you mentioned that to do with the Rosicrucians. Well, I've trained myself over the years to get in a certain state of mind, which feels like a meditation, but I view it in my mind's eye as feng shui for the psyche. So like you're moving, you're in flow, things come in and things go. And I do it while I'm listening to conversations, like while I'm at work cleaning, where my body's moving. And I kind of let concepts come in, like words. I guess I like tap into the mind, but like not in here, like out there, like as far as into other universes, whatever, and try and kind of like build and then dissolve and then build and then dissolve. And I use etymology mainly, and like mythology, just any of these patterns to try and see a clearer picture. But sometimes I have to let stuff, like it's like building a sandcastle. You pour some water on it and then let it crumble and then rebuild it again until it makes a shape that makes sense. And I'm able to go to some really interesting places by doing this, and it does feel like it's a form of meditation. It's very peaceful, very calm, very profound, like tapping into, I guess it's like that. I always like, the thing that comes to me is when I think of tapestry, like this picture, it's like the tap is tree, the tree is the tap, and then there's a story of the weird, the fate, the three fates. We're talking about past, present, and future. They're the past, present, and future that sit at the well of Yggdrasil, I think it's called, the world tree. The world tree is the tapestry, and then
Yggdrasil. Yeah.
is that how you
Ig.
say it?
Egg. Yeah, I think it's Yggdrasil.
Yggdrasil.
Like the egg is in fire.
Yeah. So then the past, present, and future, they're at the well of this tree. I've just started looking into this, and it's like the tapestry is the tap is tree, like the tree is the tap, the tree is the trio, is the pitter patter, the pattern, the light codes, the mutter matter, the mother in which we're in, and we're the central observer, the child, the seed that has the potential to become a universe of its own. And then when we tap into this trio, the Trinity, and then that's where we can find new either like very, very ancient, very old things that concepts that haven't been in this realm in this time from other universes, but it's all contained in the seed. When we tap into the tree, we go into the seed, which contains the all. And that's why I shared that image of the tree earlier, that goes up and comes down and around and goes in. And that reminds me of a vortex. And how I was just mentioned runes. I've written some stuff down. I'll try and remember it. That runes can either be like the rooms, like different rooms in our psyche, or the ruins, depending how we look at it. Like runes are a tool which allow us to kind of piece the pattern together, and the runes can either be ruins or can be rooms that we can kind of step into or we can build with, depending on how we use them. They can be a space that we step into, or they can be something which I don't have my notes on me, but that's something I'm working on. I'm looking into like what the runes are, looking into these stories, because I want to start making more videos, more content, and I need to try and do it on one thing. So I thought I'd start off with the weird, because the weird is the fate that we cast, and the weird, like, words are the fate. When we speak, we create, we cast our fate as we speak. But where do words come from? The word and the weird are related at their essence, and it comes from the thoughts as the force. But what is that? Are the thoughts us, or are we tapping in or a channel for the thoughts? And sometimes you can't put these thoughts into words, but this is what I've been trying to work out how to do by tapping into etymology, splitting words, splitting language. And perhaps language is just like time. Words are like time. You can't just, they're not linear. Words are not as they seem. Words are magical, but we see them as they are. But if you split or dissolve, reverse, change the vowels, you can come to new understandings that if you look at the definition of the word, it won't say that. It's like creating a new language, but it's not creating anything new. It's just tapping into the weird by being weird and casting your own fate, stepping off the wheel of insanity.
I think it's also important to like come up with your own words, like just from sounds alone. Like I think in a lot of ways there's a sort of an etymological understanding of, you know, the roots of words, like where they came from, their ancient sort of like, you know, their connections to ancient races and people. But I like to get even deeper in that, and I just get into the pure science of sound and symbols themselves. Just purely like what's when you hear like a random sound, like I can just make up a random word like ugrickliarch or something like that, and then it's like your mind tries to come up with something, and it's almost like there's this weird like displacement idea that I've been thinking about lately. It's almost like if you come up with a random word and you make up a word, by you mentioning that word, your mind tries to come up with something to fill in that space, like almost like as like a reflex or whatever. And it's like I realized that by doing that, and it's like playing with like, you know, these more abstract kind of strange words that don't really have any relation to like these fey words that I'm talking about, it's like it connects you to a different mind space. Like I've been thinking about how languages in a sense are essentially kind of like mental spaces. Like the English language has its own mind space, Arabic has a mind space, Sanskrit has a mind space, Hebrew has a mind space. And one of the things I've realized is that when you just kind of, you know, come up with words out of your own area, you enter some completely new space you never even thought existed before. So there's also, that's what I've always been found interesting, is just like coming up with totally different words from scratch. And I think sometimes when you come up with different words by scratch, you can look at old words and you can find new meanings that you didn't notice before. It's like another thing I've noticed with Zarfexology is that with these surfaxes, I'm starting to notice that there are sort of synchronicities with them that I wouldn't have ever picked up otherwise if I only used like English as my, you know, your basis. So, and that's like one of the main reasons, because I've gotten complaints from people before, like with my system, because people will tell me, it's like, you know, why are you using all these weird symbols? Why are you using all these weird terms? Why can't you just, you know, use more conventional terms to explain these ideas? And I realized like I could do that, but that would be functionally sort of missing the point of what this system is designed for. And it's designed to essentially expand your imagination and sort of take human perception outside of the human collective and into these sort of these outer, you know, alien spaces. And you can't necessarily, you know, get to that space, you know, if you're just thinking in, you know, just sort of simple terms, right? If you're just using, because a lot of ways, you know, if you think about like, if you like, let's say you have like a paint canvas and you have red, blue, and yellow, right? You can kind of like, you can mix, and you got to realize that in some sense you can take the red and blue and mix them into purple, and you can take the yellow and blue and make them into green, and, you know, stuff like that. So the idea is that the more words you have, it's like having a larger palette of colors to paint a picture with. I think that's kind of like why I've always liked having like a big vocabulary, just because I feel like language is more colorful if I'm using more letters of the alphabet in different words. And I just kind of like the way like the words come out of my mouth and I feel them. There's something kind of, you know, just sort of like somatically kind of satisfying about that. So I think getting into that, like, you know, the psychosomatic, like, I think even words themselves, like there's like, yes, there is a semantic meaning, right? Of the, you know, the people who originally defined these terms, these symbols, and these words, but there's also kind of like an inherent somatic meaning to them. Like if I showed you a symbol that from a magical system that you've never seen before, you'd probably come up with your own interpretations and your own sort of understanding of what that symbol or word means to you, what feelings it elicit, what images in your mind's eye does it sort of conjure up. And oftentimes what we've kind of found on this show is that even when you do that, they still tend to line up with the existing symbol system before. So it's not like these things are completely arbitrary. There's a kind of connection sort of with them. So I think that in a lot of ways, playing with glossolalia and just sort of like making up strange words and sort of like made up words, like for fantasy worlds or something, you'd be surprised at how much that actually like expands your imagination. You know, it's like in a lot of ways, like when you learn a new language, you're not just like, learning a different way to speak. You're also learning a different way to think. Like each language in itself has its own kind of way it sort of structures reality and like information. Like, cause like there's certain languages that have different like characters and properties. Like, I think like the English language is kind of more like gender neutral, whereas if you have like something more like Spanish or Italian, there's sort of masculine and feminine versions of words, and like that's like that words have gender, and that's like a big kind of important component to that. But with the English language, you may not have that gendered understanding. So by coming up with either channeling a language or coming up with a new language of scrap, it's like you're opening up a new space in the astral plane, a new sort of like area in mind space that has never been tapped before, or at least hasn't been tapped by anybody you know of. And there's something kind of really exciting about it. It's like a kind of adventure, if you will.
It's interesting how words carry feelings. And that's like one of those things I've always had as a child. And like I've often said this to people and they stare at me like I'm crazy, Like a word feels like an object. Yeah. And you can literally feel it with your mind, like without thinking it, feeling it. And it's got like a shape to it, and it's got like structure to it, and it's got like a feeling to it, and it's got like an emotional contextual feeling to it as well. And some words like clap, right? You hear the word clap. It's like it's an explosive word, right? There's onomatopoeic texture in the word. And other words like rock, rock is like it's bringing everything towards a point. Yeah. And even if you're rocking, you're moving your gravity towards itself, creating a G-force contraction. So like it's interesting what you're saying. I've always felt a very somatic connection with words. Like they feel like they've some words wind me up. Like people say those words to me, like I don't like that. So like, and it's funny, how that works. So I think there's like definitely a somatic journey to be had with words. And there's so much. I mean, even here in Africa, they reckon that the words came from somatic, language came from somatic acts, like in our local indigenous tribal lore and knowledge. So there's definitely something to that. And I think the semantic came afterwards. Yeah, I think the somatic is more like visceral. And then the semantic was how we felt about the somatic. And then how we felt about the somatic was what we would think about the feelings became the semantic. There we got the four elements coming in there. And like, for example, ig drisal, like ig. When I say the word ig, I feel a pulse in my solar plexus, ig. And that pulse in my solar plexus is like a release of contraction that shoots up to the top of my head, ig. And that means like a sense of reverberation out of my solar. It feels like fire, ig, right? Then I say dri. I say dri. I feel my feet contract, and like there's a resonance that flows through my feet. But it wants to flow outwards, but it also wants to flow with structure. But it wants to flow like not just one direction. And then my consciousness, drr means turning. Drr means turning, right? The feeling of it. It's like drr, you want to get dizzy, right? Drr, and dri, e is energy. So the spinning, turning energy. And that spinning, turning energy makes me think of that picture that you shared here. So to me, this is a pictogram of the tree of life, ig, dri, sal. Because we're talking about sal. Sal is the seal. The seal, I see the animal, the seal that's going beneath the water. It's also the soul. And the soul is the thing that the structure is balancing upon, the structure. Like that fills that space, but it's also the structure and the filling of the space. So ig dri sal, I see these dri also means three. And it relates to the word dry, which means turn. dry and dri, but it's 3 turnings. So if you're turning towards a direction, but you're coming from a direction, and you're turning around a point. So there's 3 elements involved, isn't there? Any concept of turning, because you've got to be going a direction, which means you're coming from a direction, which means you're going around a point. So those 3 vectors are your vectors that you're dealing with. And so you can sort of engineer that just from the sound. And so that the sound of ig is like a fire, explosive energy. Dri is the vector of turning, which is around a point, but it's coming from and it's going towards at the same time, which is what the tree represents, those 2 root systems up and down. And Sol is the energy that pours out of the sun that creates physical matter, but is also where it comes from. So it's the soul, it's the consciousness, it's the field of consciousness in the soul. So Yggdrasil is the spinning event of energy that is representing the structure of manifesting physicality from the spiritual. So Yggdrasil, that's what the word Yggdrasil means. So you can like engineer that just by feeling the word, and there are a lot of things that you can do, and that's probably like the deepest expression of Yggdrasil that you will find. And so you see this picture here is now a representation of Yggdrasil. And so I've now got as a somatic relation to the tree of life with the tetrahedron. Isn't that interesting? With the element of fire. And trees carry fire, right? Fire only exists because of trees, right? It could be none. So anyway, I like what you're saying, Cosmic, and I think there's a lot to it. So if you guys have your last ideas you want to throw on the
Would
table.
you be able to share the image of the other tree, the one with the light at the top?
Not that one, is it?
Not that one,
This
the
one.
other one, the one with color, if you can. So the word I'm glad you went on that journey of like splitting the word. Is it Yggdrasil? Anyway, this is how in my mind's eye I perceive it. Is the first part is egg, is the container, and then the dri is to draw or to drive, and then the end is the soul. So if it's an egg, draw, soul, that to me is conception. That's the zinc spark where the womb draws the sperm, and that is the creation of life. And the reason I want you to share this image is because it's got the water at the bottom, the womb, and it's got the light at the top. And I'd love it if this image was blended with the other tree, so there was an infinite loop, because we come from the waters, we rise up to the sun, go back into the water, and it's a constant flow. So yeah, egg draw sil, egg draw soul. I was trying to work out what sil is, like egg and draw a sil, like as you were talking, but then you mentioned soul, and I was like, that makes so much sense. The light and the water, and then the light or the womb, no, sorry, the water or the womb or the matter draws the light in, or drives the light. And you mentioned wood and it being essential for fire. That's very profound, because in a book or a story or a library is where the light is buried, and in a story that contains the words that contain the fates, like in a story, well, first off, it's a store of Ori. It's a vessel or an ark for light or life. Light and life are synonymous. So a story is a store of Ori, and a library is where the light is buried. And obviously there's a link there between fire and wood. And something very interesting that people may not know, that apparently wood is the rarest element in the universe. That on other planets, not universe, planets and stuff, there's plenty of gold, plenty of diamonds, plenty of other resources, but trees and wood, things that we use to have paper, so we can draw, so we can write stories, so we can read books, so we can create fires and share light. That's very rare, apparently. So yeah, I'll end up with that. I'll end today with that. It's been a great conversation today. I'm gonna go have my dinner in a sec. Looking forward to that. And yeah, big love everyone in the chat. Indy, Cosmic. I didn't get to meet whoever was in the chat beforehand, but maybe another future time. But yeah, much love to everybody.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to make like one more like comment about like the, you know, I think one of the reasons that wood is such a rare element is because in a sense, if you think, I was thinking about like, you know, things that are organic, right? And what distinguishes organic matter from inorganic matter is that it seems that all organisms are more than one state of matter. So if you think of regular inorganic, it's just solid, it's just liquid, just a gas, like you got your rock crystals, you got water, you got steam. But organisms seem to always be a combination of these. Like if you think about your skin, for example, like it has the hardness of a solid, but in order for it to be soft and elastic and grow, it has to have a fluid element in it. So there's a fluid aspect to skin and a solid aspect. Then you have the air that goes into your body, and then you also have the fire of combustion, of like digestion and, you know, electrical neural activity. And so if you think about like if you think about something that's like an elemental being, it's just that they are a pure element. And what separates that from something like a plant or an animal, and why they're not necessarily elemental, is because in a sense, organisms already contain all four of the elements essentially, right? Where if you think about like something like a rock, that's just one element. Or if you think of you know, a bottle of ink, for example, that's just, you know, like a liquid element, for example. Though I think ink might have like an organic component since they, you know, derive it from squids. But yeah, like that's like, I think why like you got to think about like nature and organic things. It's almost like the actual physical property of them. It's not just the fact that organisms are conscious, but like the actual physical structure of them is this kind of this weird, like, it's not really solid, it's not really liquid, it's some kind of like mix between those two. So I think that's like an important thing to comment on.
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, I think it takes all kinds to make a life. That's what it is, right? You need fire, you need water. We talk about water being the source of life, right? But we could as easily speak about fire being the source of life, right? Because that fire, that fire is that sperm. That fire is the warmth of the body that gives the warmth of life, because life is warm and comes from the sun. So the fire of all life needs plants, right? For sugar. There would be no sugar. There could be no physical activity without sugar, and all sugar comes from the sun, and that warmth of the sun is captured by the leaves, turned into sugar, and we have to eat that. And even carnivores have to eat animals that ate sugar from plants. So it has to come from the sun. And so fire could be the source of life. But water is also the source of life. It's the womb, it's the fluid. Okay. What about air? Stop breathing and your life expires faster than anything. You can stop eating, you can stop drinking. But the moment you stop breathing, I mean, you could literally, you can count the seconds until you're not alive. Like give it like, you know, 1,000 seconds, whatever, however many seconds. That's it, done. It's, you know, 10 minutes down the line and you're not alive anymore, you know? And earth, well, without earth, you couldn't have a physical body. So earth is the source of life as well. It's those physical molecules that give you shape and form. Without that, you're just a disembodied consciousness. So that's so true, Cosmic. You know, every element is as equally important as all other elements in life. And we always think of water as being the source of life because we've been trained to think that way. But I think what you're saying is quite an interesting concept and sort of something for us to think about. And the tree represents the flow of water. By the way, the water is flowing upwards to the top. In that tree, because that's what xylem It's called xylophyllum. It's called xylophyllum, isn't it? That's what xylophyllum do, right? Xylem and xylophyllum. Which one does which? I forget. The xylophyllum, I think, takes up those more salts, and the xylem takes up more of the water. Or is it the other way around? Anyway, the tree is a water transportation system up to the top. So, and then it breathes out the water. So it sucks in the water from the earth, right? And then it breathes out the water, which then, like a cloud, settles back down on the ground. Interesting thought. So you were saying that it would be nice to have the water. The tree is the movement of water. The tree is also the movement of fire, right? Because you could say that the sugar crystals, right? The sugar crystals of the sun has to be processed by the leaves, and then that has to go down into the earth, because the excess sugar has to be given to the earth. That's what a tree does. It's called exudes, to feed the microbes in the soil, or they wouldn't be able to survive. And without them, who's going to break up the minerals, right? So they got a job to do. They got to be fed. The tree knows this. So the tree has elements of fire flowing down. So the tree's fire flows from the leaves down to the soil, out of its roots. The tree's water flows from the soil up to its leaves and out through its leaves back into the world. And the air is brought in through the leaves, through the stomata, which open and close, and it takes in the CO2, like holds onto the carbon and spits out the oxygen, right? And during the day, right? So that changes at night. But so it's breathing the air in through the leaves into the system, breathing the air in and breathing out a different kind of air, which is interesting. And as for the earth, well, the tree it's pretty solid. It's like a symbol of earth, right? Because it's got that earth structure, the earth solid, full of minerals. It's basically all the minerals of the earth have been pulled up from the earth with the water, and has been tempered by the fire of metabolism of sugar, and has been allowed to keep the process and the energy moving with the oxygen in order to build on to the carbon which comes from the air. And that carbon keeps becoming the baseline building structure that the minerals from the earth get sucked up from the soil. So you can see the earth, the tree is like the world's perfect alchemist. You want to learn alchemy? Go and sit under a tree. It'll teach you all the secrets of the universe. Anyway, that's my last blow into the pipe. Odin's pipe, isn't it, Howard? Eh? That's my last puff of Odin's pipe. Howard was looking for whatever it is Odin's got in his pipe. He was like, give me a double dose of that. Anyway, sending you all big love, big blessings. It's been an honor being here with you, both of you, and Indy Sage. He had to go dancing, everybody. So Indy went off. He's got his dancing shoes on. Those little girls are out there waiting to hear about, I'm eating mushrooms that keep me up all night. He's going to have a lot of fun partying it up. Good for him. I hope he takes it easy. And as always, Cosmic, it's been an honor. Shinobi, it's been an honor. And Mayor, it was an honor, where Mayor obviously went off earlier. Sending you all big love, big blessings in the chat. Yeah, being with you guys. You guys are always fun to whenever I look at the chat, I start smiling and giggling. You guys are a thousand chunks of fun all at once. We call it chunky fun chunk. This is the fun chunk. So you guys give me lots of fun to digest, and big blessings to all of you. Take it easy, keep it sweet. The Star, Vince, Tommy, Tom Roo, Gaz, Natalie, Vince. There's Vince. Vince, I keep seeing you, and I keep like, who is this? Oh, it's Vince. Vince has got a new picture on it, and it's like, I'm so used to Vince's picture that like when I see this, and I'm like, oh, right, that's Vince, right? Can't see what the picture is; it's very small. And who else is in there? The star. D Love. D Love. I called you Dove earlier. Now that I zoom in, I see it's D Love. 3636. Nice number patterns. Natalie, Gaz, everybody else. Well, everybody else has been in the chat. Big love and big blessings to all of you. Take it easy. And don't forget to smile. Keep that smile. Wear it. Howard. How could I forget? Of course. Howard. Big blessings, everybody. Peace, honor, respect. Om Shanti.
All right. Great podcast, Franklin. Take it easy, man. Gotta peace out.